All right, well, let's welcome to the June 26th, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test and we'll see how this is going. Bear with me just for a second and we'll let people get logged in. All right, so I'm just going to unmute and make sure. Okay, so it sounds like we're doing okay. So we're going to get started here. Maybe we usually get started about 8 to 10 minutes. So we'll see if we'll let people get logged in. If you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat field. If you're watching this offline, you don't have to introduce yourself. You could, obviously feel free to do it in the comments field. If you haven't attended a Club Cubase Google Hangout before, how it basically works is people can send their questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could ask your questions in the chat field. We'll try to go through them chronologically. So as people ask your questions earlier, you have kind of a better chance of getting them answered within the Hangout. We'll try to go through as many questions as we possibly can, as completely and as succinctly as possible. So we'll try that. If we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly over and over. Sometimes we've had some Hangouts where people ask the same question 40 times and it just kind of clogs the chat field and it's harder to navigate and find questions from everyone. So if we could try to refrain from that, that would be appreciated. The index will probably later tonight. I'll go through it and we'll index all the topics that were gone over in the Hangouts with a timestamp. So we'll have that posted. Ted Springman had sent over kind of a master list of a searchable thing. So I'll see if I'll email Ted and see if we could maybe have that as a link within the fields, within the Hangout indexes as well. So people could search for other Hangouts. Thank you, Ted, for compiling that. That's I think it'd be a great use for many people. So we're going to let people get logged in. Usually takes 8 to 10 minutes to get everyone logged in as we're doing this. So like many of you, my family is working from home as I'm working here. So you may hear, my wife above me who's working directly above me and has a bunch of conference calls as well. My son is also home, so you may hear him. I may have to turn on a TV show for him. And I think he has a socially distanced play date today, so you may hear him screaming for happy because he gets to see one of his classmates. So I'll apologize in advance for any interruptions to the Hangout. We'll try to make those as quick as possible. Also, right next to me, outside my office window, we have a new home construction. So today looks like it's sod day. So they may be laying sod right outside my window. They may be doing the other side of the house now, so we might get lucky. But I'll apologize again in advance for any construction noises you may hear as well. But let's go see who's on the Hangout, and we'll get started pretty soon. Okay. So hope everyone's having a great summer day here. Okay, let me just scroll up. All right, so we're just seeing some questions about exporting and USB dongles. So we'll get to some of those. All right, so we have Newport, Rhode Island checking in. Okay, so we have Matt from Fort Wayne. He's been on a number of the Hangouts. That's great. Okay, so we have Ace also from Texas. We have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Okay. Okay, so we have Slovenia, Portland, Oregon. All right, so we have Millard from Media, Pennsylvania. I think that's outside Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. Kenosha, Wisconsin. Nepal. All right, so we'll see if we get like 5 continents here. So we have Asia, North America. We have London. So we have, that's great. So we have Europe. All right, we have Sweden, Stockport, UK. All right, so we have South Shields, England. Okay. So I see a comment from Les about, I think I emailed you the video link today for getting it Cubase working with like OBS. So check your email, see if, but I thought I sent you a link to the video today, Les. I'll check after the hangout. All right, so we have Iran, Sherman Oaks, Plymouth, UK. Okay, so we have Sir Robert from Atlanta. We have Israel, Stockholm. All right, so we have Wales, Wiltshire, South America. All right, so we have South America, North America, Europe, Asia. All right, we're doing okay. I know it's really late in the morning in Australia, but we sometimes get some Australia. So we have Paris. Okay, so a question on different playback speeds. We could do that as well. Okay, so more people are getting logged in. All right, so we have London. All right, so Pablo from Galicia, Spain. Portugal. All right, so we have the Iberian Peninsula well represented. All right, just a couple more minutes and we'll get started. Okay, so more people getting logged in. Same question about the UR22C. Okay, so we have Norway. All right. Oslo, Norway. So two people from Norway right after each other. Always wanted to go there. My brother went on vacation and just looked so incredibly beautiful. Okay, we'll just maybe another 30 seconds and we'll get started. All right, so we have New Jersey. All right, and if you guys want to start entering questions that you may have in the comments field, then we'll get started here soon. All right, so we have Hungary. Sao Paulo. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to scroll up here in my timeline. Okay, so we have a question. What's the most convenient way to export stems, tracks all at once? So if we do this, you could go, and if you had the Cubase Pro version, you could go to your export audio mixdown, and then usually it'll default to channels, but here we could actually choose to do multiple. And at this point, if I wanted to take this project, I could take my group channels, my effects channels, instrument tracks, VST instruments, all of my audio channels for this particular project. And then if I wanted to actually just create a new project with this, we could just come over here. So once we have the batch export, this would export between the left and right locators. So set your left and right locators. Go to your file to export audio mixdown, and at that point you could just choose on the channel selection, just choose multiple, and then you could select all your different devices and choose your file path, and at that point you could just export away. So that's the easiest way to do a multi-track export of your files. Okay, question. If I was to use Cubase between computers, not simultaneously, is it as simple as ejecting the Steinberg USB from my main workstation and plugging it into my laptop? Or are more steps involved, internet connection, transferring licenses, etc.? So once the license is on the USB-E licenser, you could install the program freely on however many computers you want, connect the USB-E licenser. You don't have to do any relicensing because the USB-E licenser is already authorized and licensed, and just, physically connect the USB cable to the computer that you want to run Cubase on, and then you'll be all set. Okay. Okay, so it says, "Hi, Greg. Jay from New Haven, Connecticut. Could you please reach out to Steinberg to convey that all plugins and expansions should be marked showing which package they are included with, if they are? I'm eyeing a few pieces like Absolute 4, but don't want to duplicate expansion purchases. It can be difficult to dig through. And comparing all software repeatedly. I think it's pretty clear. I could take a look at the Absolute 4 page, but I think when you do that, it's pretty clear what's included. The things that would be duplicated that come with Cubase from expansion 4 would be probably Padshop 2 and Retrolog. You'd get the Howie and Sonic SE as a player. But getting the Grand, the Hawaiian Symphonic Orchestra, and the other sound sets, I think those are the only ones that would come with it. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could take a look at it afterwards. But I think it's pretty clear what's included with it. But I'm not looking at the web page right now. Okay, so second question from the range control. Please do a separate video class outside of Hangouts, composing two genres, classical and hip hop, to a sample video on Nuendo so we can see your process. Thank you, Greg. I did a pretty extensive, if you look under the Greg Ondo Q&A in the latest series a few months ago, I did a pretty extensive all this stuff that you would encounter when scoring to video, handling all of the offsets, how to work with, also working, directly with, stuff like linear mode, musical mode. So that's probably, people have mentioned that's the most comprehensive video on kind of working with video in Cubase and, exporting the files. So look at that. So just look at, I think it's like video workflows, but if you go to youtube.com/Cubase and go to playlist, you'll see Greg Ondo Q&A, and there's a series, maybe like 8 different playlists. And in the latest series of playlists, you'll see kind of it's about a 20-minute, it's not necessarily genre specific for classical or hip hop, but it'll kind of, I think, give you a really good understanding of how to make the video work easily for your needs. Okay. Okay, so it says, hello, Greg, question. With multiple exports, a way to keep the track widths intact, mono tracks, groups export to mono, and stereo tracks, groups to stereo interleaved. Am I missing something? There's a pretty easy way to do this, and and I realize this is probably a bit of a workaround, but it does work. So if I go to, let me just open up like another project here. So here I have a bunch of mono tracks, and let's say if I have just some MIDI information here, let me just come up with some fake MIDI stuff. So we could have all these tracks here will be mono, as you can imagine. So I will switch this over to drum editor. So let's say, okay. All right, so let's say I have, stereo drums. So what you could do if you wanted to export both mono and stereo simultaneously is we could go to your outputs and just add a mono bus. This doesn't have to be connected anywhere. And then what we want to do is to select all of the mono tracks before we do an export. And once you do this once, and you could just kind of leave that in your template or in your VST connections. I will come over here, and instead of the stereo out, I'll hold down Alt Shift for all the selected tracks, and we're going to route those to the mono output. So now as I look at all of my tracks here, we'll see that they're all routed to the mono output. So once we have, except for our VST instrument track, so let's say this will still be routed out to going to our stereo out. So I routed the mono groups or the mono tracks and mono groups. You can route to the mono out, stereo tracks, stereo groups to the stereo out. Now I will come over here. Let's just do a quick export audio mix down like we showed earlier. So I want all of my audio tracks and my instrument tracks. I will create a new project. So let's just come here. I will store it just on a new folder on my desktop. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to export audio. So it's doing it between the left and right locators. I'll make a new project. And as we do this, we see that the mono tracks are mono, and our maple kit will be the only stereo track that we have there. So as we look at that, so just again, set it to where your mono groups and mono tracks are routed to a mono bus. And you may just have to make just an audio connections and just route, just make a false, like a phantom output, route your mono tracks to the mono out, your stereo tracks to stereo out, and then you could have both mono and stereo simultaneously. Okay, so we have a question from Ace. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, we're doing great. Thank you. Hope you're doing great as well and staying safe and healthy. In Cubase 10.5, how to extract chords from piano wave file and convert to MIDI, and then be able to see the chord pads and the actual chords used. Currently, the audio to MIDI in Cubase is designed for monophonic sources, so it's not really intended for polyphonic, and there's some stuff that does it, but it's always been a little questionable on a lot of complex material. So probably if you do a Thelonious Monk on any of them, it's not going to figure out the chords properly with different chord voicings. But currently Cubase is set up only to really do monophonic, like a bass or vocal for the pitch to MIDI. So Okay, so a question from Taylor. Using VST Connect SE and my client was able to hear the talkback mic, but nothing else worked. He was monitoring through a USB mic. What are some possible reasons for the inability to connect the music? Is it so? As soon as we so it could really depend on, when you say USB mic, that could, it may not have ASIO drivers that are set up for it. So if they have a USB mic with ASIO drivers, so when you're doing that, make sure that, one thing that I see a lot of people do when doing VST Connect is they leave the talkback on. So on the engineer side, so maybe the person that's doing the recording, make sure you mention that they hear the talkback. So that signal was doing okay. So, but you may have to disable the talkback when they want to hear the other sources. So that throws a lot of people off with that. But if they have an ASIO driver, make sure that, they have on the VST Connect Performer that they have the inputs and outputs set correctly for the USB mic. And make sure that on your end that the talkback is disabled, because if you have the talkback enabled, and it's really easy at first when you start working with VST Connect for that to remain enabled, and then you don't really hear the audio that's going directly from Cubase. And you want to make sure also they're able to hear talkback mic, but make sure that you have like the control room set up, and that you created a Q mix, and you're using the Q mix to send the audio to them. Okay. So I see a question. Is it possible to do a sample rate conversion without changing pitch, for example, 44.1K files in a 96K project? So let's go ahead and set this up. I believe it's possible. Okay, so I'll just come over here. I'll just do kind of a pitched. All right, so let's say I'll just record one single note here. I'll play it as an F note. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just kind of render that as an audio file. And first I'm going to check my sample rate. I'll just do this by going to my project setup, Shift S, so we're at 44.1. So let's go ahead and render in place. Okay, so we now have this. And I want to change. So when we listen to the particular note, I will go ahead and unmute the MIDI here. So we'll place back. We'll hear both the MIDI and the audio in the same pitch. And I'm going to switch to sample rate. Let's say to 48K. All right, so we'll say convert audio to the new rate. We'll say convert. And do we want to keep the source files in the pool directory anyway? We'll keep. And let's, do we want to keep the audio events at their sample position? We'll say no. And so this way it's playing the same exact pitch as it was before. So we play the F. And now that this file is playing back at 48K, and I will just go ahead and go to the pool to make sure. So once you kind of follow the main prompts, we'll go to the audio. So So we see that it's now at 48K and it's playing back at the same pitch. So following, if you change the sample rate, following kind of the main prompts will maintain the pitch and convert it from 44.1 to 48K. Okay. Okay, going through some of the introductions. Thanks for everyone coming on and joining us on a Friday night here in the summer. Hope everyone's looking forward to a great weekend. Okay, so let's see. We have a question. Greg, are there any decent iOS-based controllers that let me use my iPad to work with Cubase? There's a lot of people will use Touch OSC. You could get the Cubase or get the Cubase IC Pro, which will allow you to do transport and set up different keyboard shortcuts. That's a very popular one as well. So, Touch OSC, there's a couple ones that will allow you to kind of make your own MIDI controls. But I know a lot of my friends spend, lots of times configuring, Touch OSC, to drive their Cubase rigs. A lot of composers will do that, but the Cubase IC Pro is also a great solution, especially if you have people that are tracking and doing kind of headphone and monitor mixes. All right. All right. So I see Jazz Dude is on a Hangout. That's great. All right. Okay. So the current key command allows to increment and decrement by plus or minus 1 dB. I believe this is regarding volume automation. How can I increment or decrement by a lesser amount, say 0.1 dB? Project Logical Editor doesn't have volume as a parameter to vary it. So if we wanted to, there is a key command if you wanted to adjust the automation on a particular track. So let's say if we have automation enabled here, I'll just put an automation point. So if we select all of the automation points here, let's make this a little larger so it's more obvious. If you want to do it through the Project Logical Editor, it's not necessarily based by dB values, but it can be pretty arbitrary what a dB value is really in relation. But if we wanted to come here and use a Project Logical Editor, we could say we want to media type is equal to automation. We want to trim, and then you could say multiply by 0.95, something like that. And now as we do this, so we want to transform, that could just, and again, it's not by a specific dB, but if you wanted to, you could say multiply by 0.995. And then every time that you trigger this, it would slightly take down the automation points as we see here. So you could have a key command for that, or if you want it to be 0.99, then every time that you just trigger this, it'll go down slightly. So, if it's, so that's an easy way to do it. And if you want to do the opposite, you could say multiply by 1.01, and now you could just apply, and that would just gradually go up. So while it's not in the value of a dB, you can, increase or decrease slightly, which sounds like what you want to do. Also, once you're in the values here, you could just, select. So let's say if we have a number of automation points here, and, this could work the same way. So if I had these selected, you could just go to the information line and use your mouse scroll wheel to increment and decrement. But if you want to do it from like a keyboard shortcut reliably, make 2 project logical editor presets. Say media type is automation. And you want to trim, you can multiply one preset, by 1.01, and then another preset, so that would increase and multiply by 0.99, and that would decrease. And then you could just have key commands to fire off those presets, and you would find those key commands under the process project logical editor. So when we go to your key commands, any of the presets that you store, you could just find under process project logical editor presets, and then you could assign your own key command to that you could fire off from any number of sources. Okay, so we have Paraguay. Okay. Okay, hi Greg, is there a way to play a project at half speed in Nuendo as in Pro Tools? There's a couple different ways you could approach this. So let's just jump back over to this project. One is you want to make sure that all the audio files have a tempo, and if they've been recorded into Cubase, you could automatically have that, and you wanted to just come over here and make sure that you have musical mode active. So we're going to activate musical mode. So now if I wanted to come here, there's a couple different ways to approach it. I think you could go to, let's see if there's, the scrubbing is available on the transport. Let me just, so one way of doing this is you can set up a key command. I think there's going to be a, okay, let me just, and let me just search for scrub here. Okay, so if I want to just take this, let's say since I have these in musical mode, I can come over here and let me just turn that off, and I'll just revert this quickly because I rebust it to the mono outs. So I come here again, just make sure that they're all in musical mode, that the tempo is there. So right now we're at like 100 beats a minute, and as we play, all I had to do is just change the tempo. So let's say I want to be 50 beats a minute. Or 80 beats a minute, or 120 beats a minute. So now I want it to be 60 beats a minute. So there's a number of different ways to be able to do that. Let me just see if I can find one other way that may help with that. So I'll just put it back to 100. And just let me look under key commands under maybe transport. Okay, let me just see if I can. Okay, shuttle play 1/2 times. So let's come here and I will set up a key command for this. So this will be under transport. You'll see shuttle play. So let me just set this up. I'll make my own key command. So as I play now, and I'll hit this key command. But that's going to change the pitch. So if you want to do kind of like a quick. So once you do that, so you could also set up for like a jog scrub wheel type functionality. And again, that would just be under shuttle play. So if you wanted to be, twice, 4 times, 1/4, 1/8, you could set that up as well. But that will change the pitch. So you can do it either without changing the pitch or changing the pitch. Okay, so see question, just got UR22C, seen the DSP in mixer section in videos. I can just find the DSP in the track inspector. I can find the DSP, but not in the mixer section. The tab hardware isn't there. It's because I don't use control room. The UR22C, there's kind of, our colleagues at Yamaha had changed some of the software on that. So now when you come over here, and it's probably better that you don't use a control room as tracking with that. So when we go to, let's say, our audio connections, I'll just set my main outputs here. And let's set my mono in to have a UR24C, which is very similar. So now, as soon as I want to come here, we could go to, the particular hardware input. So if I say, let's go to mono in 1, at that point, you could just see it directly from the hardware choices on the inspector here. And that's kind of how the later interfaces are designed, because a lot of people kind of miss the ability to use, of opening up the input channels and routing it here as opposed to selecting a particular track. So let's say, so once that is routed, to be able to, let me just add a track here. So let's say we'll just do mono 1, make a mono track. And then let me just make sure my output's stuck. Okay. Or took rather, sorry. So now you'll see the UR24C. So all the settings here. So I think that this is probably the design intention is to make this a little more obvious, so you don't have to go into the mixer, open the input channels, open the hardware tab. So once you have that configured, all the internal DSP could just be accessed directly from the inspector. So I think that probably makes a lot more sense. So the earlier interfaces worked only in only in the input channels of the mixer. So a lot of people miss the ability of accessing the DSP. So at that point, that's why that design decision was made. And it started with the AXR4 and the URC series of interfaces kind of carried on that tradition. Okay. So let's just move on. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg. I've given up on trying to find an alternative pedal controller for the Axe FX2 or 3. Sorry. I use a Cubase MIDI control to switch using PC and CC values. Brilliant. Makes me record more too. That's good. So glad that seems like that's working out for you. So let's go ahead. Thanks for letting us know. I know a lot of people really love their Axe effects. So we have a question: any way to scrub MIDI in Cubase? Selecting one note in editor plays it, but selecting multiple doesn't. That's kind of the intention, because MIDI itself has to generate the actual MIDI note to be triggered, so it's not like an audio that can be scrubbed. What some people I see do is come over here, like if they wanted to go through notes quickly, is just using kind of the arrow keys. And let me just take step entry off here. And I'll just... So it's just kind of to navigate through the different keys in the editor here. So I know a lot of people end up kind of doing that. So let me just see if this is, check my connections here quickly. Sorry about that. Okay, so if I wanted to come directly to here, we'll just hold down the left or right arrow keys. If you're quickly looking for like a bum note. But, MIDI by itself, has to actually trigger the note. So it's not like audio where, it's kind of a different beast where we could choose to scrub the audio, directly here. You could do that with audio, but, since MIDI has to actually fire the note message off, it works differently. But try just, what a lot of people who kind of want like a scrubbing mentality, will do is just kind of come here and just hold down the left or right arrows on the computer keyboard. So that's a left arrow, will take you backwards. So see if that helps you with that. But, realize that MIDI is going to be a note message that then needs to be triggered. So it's hard to, because most of the instruments don't have the ability to scrub as well. All right. So my timeline is officially jumped already. So let me just roll back up. Bear with me just a second. All right. Okay, so we have people checking in Milan from Montenegro. Always wanted to go there. So let's see, question. I had to reinstall Cubase on my PC and it won't produce a new e-license code. Is this something you can help with? Depending on which version of Cubase, if it's a soft e-license code, if you had the soft e-licenser, what you need to do is you could go to your My Steinberg account and request a reactivation. But if you have a USB e-licenser, that's required by programs like Cubase Artist or Cubase Pro, you don't have to reinstall the e-license. You don't have to do a new e-license code. So if it's on a USB key, you can just freely connect it without having to do any reauthorizations. But if it's like a Cubase LEAI or Elements, just go to your My Steinberg account, and then you could request a reactivation code. So okay, so a question. Hi Greg, how do you eliminate, for example, 4 bars that has an increasing or decreasing tempo, selecting the tempo channel and not affecting the location of the remaining events on a grid? Okay, so let's say if I had a tempo track here, and let's say I'll just activate a quick tempo track here. So let's say, okay, we have our tempo, and So just make sure I'm understanding this right. Selecting the tempo channel, not affecting the location of the remaining events on the grid. So if you wanted to make a cut that would change the that would cut, a lot of times people, when they select events here, so let's say, okay, I wanted to, delete, so let's just say, just doing kind of a global cut here. So let's say they want to delete all of these files, and then they hit delete, that the tempo will be there. Or if we choose to, what I would do is, if you hold down, I think it's command, if you hold down command or control plus shift and use the range selection tool, once you're here, we could choose to, that would do kind of a global change here. And I think I'm understanding you right. And at this point, I could go to edit to range and just say delete time. And that would delete, the events and the tempo information simultaneously. So at this point, if I just chose to delete the events here like this, it wouldn't do that. Or if I did a delete, let's say the events up to here, so I have that, and I choose to do a range and say delete time. Sorry, I just had something else selected. So if I come here and choose to delete time, if I did this right, so let's just say delete time. Again, something else must be selected. So at that point, you may not affect the tempo information, but just the selected events. So if I come here, let's just try that, and under range, I must have something else kind of tied, but but if you want everything, just try using the range tool and holding down control or command plus shift as you do that, and that will do a global selection, and then try to just do a delete time, and then I think that'll get you where you want. But if I'm misunderstanding your question, just let me know, Diego. Okay, question. Just wanted to confirm that you are unable to route group buses to audio tracks in Cubase Artist. You have a video showing the capability being available in Cubase Pro. I think that is one of the distinctions between Cubase Pro and Cubase Artist. So, if that's something that you want to do in the workflow that you want to employ, you may want to consider upgrading. So, I think it's a great investment to upgrade, from Artist to Pro, for, what you get with it. So, okay, so see, question from Ted. Hi, Greg. Are there any upcoming Yamaha related software developments of note that are destined to merge with Cubase, thanks to Steinberg's company affiliation? There's always, since the merger, over 15 years ago, there's, been a lot of joint developments. There's nothing, and generally Yamaha and Steinberg don't like to talk about equipment until it's shipping. We try to avoid, as what some deem the anticipation factor of announcing stuff, months or years before it is available. So, there's a lot of under the scenes technology, under the hood technology that is integrated that makes things just kind of work much easier than expected. But no major announcements that I know of to share with you guys. But there's a lot of great stuff that we see currently with hardware and the integration of that that's going on that we see with like Nuendo Live being integrated with Yamaha mixers, like even the Yamaha TF range that, just make like, a real joy to kind of use and integrate the hardware and software together. Okay, so we have a question. Cubase files on PC to Cubase on iMac. Will that work? Certainly. You could take your files freely back and forth between Mac and PC. No issues there at all. So you can just freely take your, whatever computer platform you like. If you navigate with someone who's, die hard the other platform from what you are, that's perfectly fine. Everyone could have their preferences, and your Cubase files will freely open up between them without issue. Please tell what exact version of Cubase it is there, or there are three: Cubase LE, AI, Cubase Artist, and Cubase Pro. The version that I'm using, if that's a question, please tell us exactly. Okay, so this may be Jazz Dude helping someone else out. So sorry. In regarding to the licenses that was discussed. So, but I think we discussed that already. Thanks for your help, Jazz Dude. So I see a question. I lost my e-licenser and reported it. Can I use Cubase Elements or Artist? So what you could do if you've done a zero downtime report, what I know some people do is, generally, many times, they are able to restore the licenses, but you may have to purchase a new e-licenser key. What I've, for people I know that have lost it, I'm in contact with people that lose their e-licenser, like, once a year, and they total panic, and then they find it in their, jeans pocket or something, So, but what a lot of people do, if you wanted to run a Cubase Elements in the meantime while your license is getting sorted out, is a lot of people will just run a trial version of that. And you could also, if you needed the features are in Cubase Pro, purchase a USB e-licenser. And at that point, while it's getting sorted out, run the trial version. And then you have kind of full functionality where you could save projects, open them, work. And when a trial runs out, probably, before that time, you'll have your license sorted out, hopefully. So that's a clever way of doing it. I know a lot of people, very fearful, like when they're on tour, so, when our artists would tour a lot, and, they would just keep an extra, like I think this happened to Zed, kind of DJ producer Zed recently. He left his key, and he has I believe he has a residency at somewhere in Las Vegas, and he lives in LA, and he left his key accidentally, and they just went to a local store, bought a USB e-licenser, and used the trial version for the weekend. So it's a pretty common technique to do. All right. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. So I see why Cubase doesn't have Mac full screen support. We have like the little header up here, but as you can see, I'm running it on Mac here. So it seems to take my whole screen pretty well. So I don't seem to have an issue with using almost every bit of screen real estate on my Mac. So. Okay. So I see question, Tom Sweden here, how to change the whole chord track in a project, up or down some tones. So if I have a chord track here, I'll just make this obnoxiously large. You could select all of the events in the chord track. So say if I just want to come here, and you'll see on the info line, so when I come here, It's usually just where you see root key, you could just use the mouse scroll wheel and be able to adjust and transpose just like that. So just hover over your root key here, and then you could transpose all of your chord tracks accordingly. So just the ones that are selected. So, and I think if you probably hold down shift and double click, you could select all the chords after that particular point and then just transpose like so. All right, good to see Robbie Bowling on a hangout from Dallas. Hope you're doing well, Robbie. Okay, so I see a question. How do you stream the DAW audio? I kind of came up with the technique many years ago, and I'm, and it works well and reliably. So I'm not, I don't feel the need to experiment a lot. But I have just my normal audio interface connected here in my studio setup. So I have my Steinberg UR22C interface that I'm using. And that's what the laptop is configured to use. And I take the audio, the analog outputs of that into a Yamaha mixer. I think the model number, and this is an old one, I probably had it 5 years or so, but it just worked incredibly reliably, as most Yamaha stuff is incredibly reliable. And then I take the analog outputs of my audio interface from the MacBook that I'm using, connect it into that. I take a microphone, also connected into that same mixer, and that mixer has a USB output. So when I go to OBS that I'm using here, I just use the Yamaha mixer for the streaming audio. So this way, Cubase is seeing one audio interface. I have another interface, basically a USB mixer that's combining the microphone and the audio from the computer together, and that's what's being used for the transmission. So I know a lot of people, my colleague John Barron, who does the Discover Dorco sessions, he does like the Hangouts for Dorco monthly. He just uses two audio interfaces, and one is from the computer, and one is, he connects a microphone into a UR, and I think he does just a loopback, and then transmits from the second audio interface. I know that some people use like Voice Meter and other plugins that will allow you to, like you can install a plugin and stream that, and, some people always suggest that, and then like in the last Hangout, someone said that was the best way to do it, and then other people indicated right after that it just didn't work for them. And generally for my Hangouts, I don't want to have one plugin because I may just start a new project, and I don't want to have to put a plugin on every single project. So I find that kind of separating the two audio streams works very reliably. So that's what I do for streaming the audio for these sessions. Okay. Just seeing one of the Agent K is asking everyone to hit the thumbs up button. So I could concur with that. So if you've learned a new trick or tip, feel free to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Okay, question. If I reinstall Cubase, will I have to get a new CD key? You won't have to get a new CD key, but you could just use the Steinberg download assistant. Because not every computer most laptops don't come with CD-ROMs or DVD drives anymore. So you could get a utility, and this will, so just get the Steinberg download assistant, and then you could see your various versions of Cubase, Dorco, Nuendo, different sounds and loops, spectral layers, Wavelab, and other products. And this will allow you to have kind of a centralized download center. So that way you won't need a CD or DVD drive. It's all just kind of on our server, and you can download it from our server quickly and efficiently. All right, good to see Vinny from Orlando on the Hangout. Okay, so I see a question from Pinda. Hi, Greg. When I press record, the cursor is starting from bar 1, regardless of where I set my left locator. All right, so let's go ahead and just get this set up. I'll just do an empty project here. And I'll just add an audio track. And let's add instrument track. Okay, so you have your left locator. Let's say it's at 17-ish. Okay, so right now, let's say if I just hit play, I'll arm these two tracks, and then I hit record. All right, so now I recorded the audio and MIDI. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. If I just here, let's say I start here and I just hit record, I may hear I'll hit C to turn the metronome on. I may hear two measures. But it's not necessarily tied directly to the left and right locator. So I'm not sure if you're navigating by going back, there may be a preference that could. Let's just take a look, see if there's preferences that may. There's a, snap MIDI parts to bars that sometimes throws people off. But if you just hit record from wherever you're at, so as soon as I come here and I just hit the record icon, it's just going to go directly into record after my count in. And it's not jumping back. So make sure that, I'm not sure how you're instantiating record. But it seems to kind of be recording directly from, if I hit 1 and then hit record, I'll get my 2 measures, and I have like a pre-roll set up here. But then that seems to be recording exactly where I want to. So check just out of curiosity. Yeah, so I'm not sure what would cause it to jump. So the left locator is not necessarily, it's more the playhead position that's going to account more unless you're doing a punch in. So you could maybe just make sure that you get I and O to deactivate and deactivate punch in and punch out, which you could see here just to the left of the transport. But the left locator shouldn't have any effect unless you have it configured for punch in. Okay. Just reading through some of the different comments. Okay, I see Jazz Dude helping out people. He's always incredibly helpful. Thank you. Okay, question. Could you please show me how to insert a track to record bass or guitar? I assume mono track for some reason. My pan, is always hard left. Should be center. Thanks. So when you add a track, make sure that you have the configuration set to mono and probably also the audio output set to mono. So if I come here, let's say, let's say I have it set to mono and mono, I go to add a track, then like you don't really have a panning control. But when you add a track for like guitar or bass, make sure that, the configuration is set to mono, but the audio outputs are set to stereo. And now when we add a track, you'll have the panning control because it's going to 2 different channels. But if I come here, then I don't have a panning control. So make sure that even though it's a mono track, that when you add it, that the audio outputs are routed to a stereo. Otherwise, you won't see the panning options available on that particular track. So I see in discussion to maybe transferring the license from Cubase AI. And someone asked, will getting a dongle solve the issue? So if you had a dongle, you could transfer the soft e-licenser license to the USB e-licenser and move that freely around. Once you do that, though, it's going to be, you can't go from a USB e-licenser back to a soft e-licenser. So once you transfer it to a USB e-licenser, it's going to stay on there. But there's also just the reactivate license functionality from your My Steinberg account. So it's a pretty common thing. Okay, hi Greg, do we have 80s type drums in Cubase 10.5 Groove Agent, like Linn drums, tom snares? If yes, where are they? So there's a lot of 80s type sounds, and let's see if I could find some here without spending a zillion hours going through, there's so much content that's available, but let's just load a kit. So maybe some of the older Groove Agent ones. So let me just move something off my desk here. So and let me adjust the octave down here. So you do. It's pretty 80s. Let me adjust my tablet over just a little bit. So, go through probably like the Groove Agent 1 may have some pretty good choices. So, and if you wanted to, but there's all sorts of different expansions that are available as well. Let me just see. I think those are. Some laser beam stuff. This may be a little more contemporary. But, definitely check out some of the original Groove Agent 1 kits. There's some good choices there for 80s stuff. Okay, so just saying question, can you transfer comp license to USB dongles? I'm not sure what... So if the comp license is like the computer license where the soft e-licenser, the soft e-licenser can be transferred to the USB e-licenser, and then that could be freely connected anywhere. All right, good to see Gareth on a Hangout, long time attendee here. So it says, hey Greg, I know Ondo has Gain Connect to connect to Wise, but what's the best way to do something similar in Cubase? Currently, there isn't a Gain Connect equivalent in Cubase. So if you're not familiar, what that will allow you to do is to basically take your audio assets and files that you're working with in Nuendo and have kind of a two-way communications directly with Audio Kinetic Wise, which is, probably the most popular audio, middleware. So, but if that's something that's important to you, I think there's still the, that's something that you do that's kind of a unique Nuendo feature. And if it's something that's appealing to you, you may want to consider, there is a Nuendo promotion currently going on that a lot of Cubase users are taking advantage of. That may be something to look at, but there really isn't an equivalent to that functionality in Cubase. It's kind of unique to Nuendo. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg. Instead of exporting outside the mix, how would you print a mix in Cubase into an audio track inside the same project and then master this track inside project before exporting? So let's come here. So if I have my particular project here, so let's say, all you'd have to do if I wanted to do kind of a pre-mix inside of Cubase is go to I'll set my left and right locators to encompass the entire project. I will come over here, do an export audio mix down. Instead of multiple, I would just choose to do, my single stereo mix output. And then we have these options labeled after export. So I would just say insert pool and create an audio file, create an audio track. At this point, I export the audio. So it's going to do all the number crunching, export the mix. The mix will then be placed at the very bottom of the track. So just give it a couple of seconds here. Okay. It shows kind of a big project with lots of instruments, but we'll be patient. Okay, so once we've done this, it'll now automatically place that at the bottom of our project. And now I could just solo this. And as we play, this is my mix down. Once that file is in my project, I could also just go to my audio menu to statistics. So I'll just come right over here. It'll do an analysis of my mix for me. So this way I could see what my overall levels are. My levels are too hot. I could, at this point, do this, and I could treat my mix as kind of a single entity. And if I wanted to apply processing, do some horrible compression on it. And let's just so if I wanted to compress it heavily. So really just to, do that process where you want to take your mix down. I know a lot of people do that and save the project so that, worst case scenario is they know exactly what the mix is, but go to your export. Again, audio mix down, choose single, and then on the after export, choose the insert pool and create audio track. Then it's just going to be added directly back into your project for you with sample accurate precision. Okay, so it says, question, I know you have covered almost everything in your last videos, but I'm struggling to find, is there an HTML link doc A to Z that could link to all your YouTube answers? So Ted Springman, who's on the Hangout, I believe today, I thought I saw him pipe in a little earlier. He just sent one over this morning, and he was incredibly gracious and kind enough with his time he just sent over a document with all of the files that are linked, like in kind of by topic that you could search through. So I think we should be able to maybe share that. I sent it over to my colleagues in Hamburg earlier, but it was kind of towards the end of the day, their time. So, but maybe we could see if we could have it posted on as part of a link to it. I think Ted said he may be able to put on a OneDrive, and I'll check back with him. But the list has been compiled as of all the Hangouts as of Tuesday. So, everyone thank Ted, and hopefully with Ted's permission, I could just kind of put that in perhaps put a link to the OneDrive document so that people could search kind of all the topics. I think he said it was over 2,500 questions. So it's I think a great way to coalesce so many of the questions for people. So I'll check with Ted and see if we can get that added as in the comments section so that people could have access for that. Okay. It says, "Hi, Greg. If I record audio with manual punch-in, the snap point of the newly recorded part is always at the start from its default. Is there a solution to force the snap points to be on the grid? Thanks." Not really. It's, because the audio could be, it's intended to be, not necessarily tied to the grid. But if you come here, let's say if you move to the grid, so let's say, okay, I want to go to, I want the snap point at measure, right at 6-1. So what I could do is select the file here. So at this point, I will just put in at measure 6. That's where I want the snap point. And you could manually put in the snap point. I think if we go to audio, and it might be under, let's see, so when it was, but there is a little function. I'm just trying to, okay, snap point to cursor. It's like sitting right there. So if I have that, what I could do now is just say snap point to cursor. And now when I go into the sample editor, that snap point will always be at the cursor. So if you have your cursor even if you've recorded slightly ahead of the grid, if you just move your cursor to the grid, at this point we could choose, and if we look at our snap point here, we'll see it probably jump. So right now my cursor is at 531. My sync point is here. And what I could do now is just go to audio and choose snap point to cursor, and we'll see this snap point here adjust to the cursor position. So, set the cursor where you want and just go to audio, snap point to cursor. And that will put you kind of on a grid, even if, you recorded slightly ahead of the beat or slightly off from the beginning of the grid. All right, good to see Ambient Dave on the Hangout. Long-time attendee. All right. All right. Okay, just going through different comments. See, are people helping others? It's great. Okay, question. If you want to use the sounds from a synth in my iPad, how would you go about connecting via audio interface for best signal? I would, if you have an audio interface, depending, ideally, sure that, if we're recording a synth, that probably the headphone out into a good audio interface would work. Many interfaces can work on iPad as well. So if you have like the Steinberg UR series, they're all designed to work, on iOS, but you may not be able to, transmit in iOS and then capture. Probably for a lot of people, taking the 1/8 inch out jack, in a pinch, taking the 1/8 inch headphone out, and going 1/8 inch mini jack and connecting that into your audio interface, I think would be fine. So I don't think if it sounds bad, it's not going to be that connection. That's probably the fault. Okay. All right. So we have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Good to see you on a Hangout. Okay. So we have a question from Gareth. Could you show an overview of envelope shaping options within Cubase? i.e. for bass line. So I use envelope shaping a lot on drums. So let's just go ahead and set it up. But you can use on a lot of, different sources that you don't expect. I've used it on a master bus or like in Wavelab a lot as well. So I will start off. Let's add an instrument track. And I'll just check out one of the new libraries I got, the Marco Miniman. All right, so I'll just get a drum library fired up here. Okay. Just try a different pattern with some more drum based here. All right, so if I wanted to, run this through like any acoustic drums, and a lot of times when you have kind of bad drums that aren't kind of punching well, is when the envelope shaper can really come in handy. So we'll see this under dynamics. You see an envelope shaper. So we could think of this as your attack, decay, sustain, release for analog sources. So if I want it more attack, more release, and you could adjust the output accordingly. Or if you want it So on just kind of normal stuff, I'll just do a drum kit that's maybe not as flattering. So we'll come over here, listen to this, just give you an idea. Slow tempo down a little bit here. Okay, so now I'll just kind of turn this on. So if I want it to be like really tight to blend, or if you want to like really long release and where we were, and just kind of cranking up your envelope shaper. So it's kind of the anti-suck plugin for drums. But let's say if I want to try it on like a bass track, which is kind of one of the original intents of the question. So I'll just turn this off just a little bit and let's just drop it as an insert. So I find that the envelope shaper comes in really handy when I see spending so much time trying to get the magic compression sound that you could just kind of do it with the envelope shaper and kind of get the sound that people are looking for. And one thing that maybe a lot of people aren't as hip to is when you get to the channel strip, the envelope shaper, you could see under tools. So you'll have the choice of a de-esser or the envelope shaper here, and you could have kind of those same controls within the channel strip. So I always, like for drums that just aren't, really like hitting you the way you want. If you want more powerful attack or more length, the envelope shaper is a great choice for that. So you can use on many different things. Okay, so odd question. How does one add 32 bars of space before 0 beginning point of an orchestral session? So let's say we have our project here. We're starting at 1. Let's go to your project setup. You could hit Shift S or project menu to project setup. And we'll see display bar offset. Let's just put it to 32. And I think this might just do it. It says we modified the bar offset. Do you want to keep the project content at its bar positions? We'll say yes. And now what we have is our material starting at bar 1, and then we could have 32 measures of like a pre-roll added. So just go to your project setup, Shift S, and then on your display bar offset. So, and just type in 32. Okay. Okay, just reading through some different comments. It's great. Okay. Question, could you please outline the standard order in inserts you would use effects, for example, compressor, EQ, reverb, stereo enhancer? What is the proper way of order of effects for anything? I'm never confident with that. It's really, there's no real set, order, and I think a lot of people sometimes get stuck in, it's like, and I saw it when I was a recording engineer, realize that recording engineers are incredibly, almost superstitious. I remember one engineer I had to work with, he had a #1 record with one, and he used one particular microphone. And the microphone was positioned where it was hanging down as opposed to pointing up. And so every session that he did from that point on. He used that same microphone, the same exact serial number. We had to find that particular one and sneak it out of other sessions without other artists realizing it. It had to be pointing upside down, and he felt that that was like, you know, the only reason that he was going to be successful. It had nothing to do. That was a really clever music video for that particular song and had a really cute girl, and everyone loved the video, and it was a catchy song. But to the engineer, it was the microphone. So I try not to get, you know, held up on, you know, I did it this way once. I try to approach every song as a new, fresh thing and try to come up with a solution that's needed for a particular song, as opposed to reusing the same tricks over and over again. So there really is no particular, you know, method. You know, if you need to EQ first before you compress, or compress before you EQ, either way is fine. It's whatever is serving the purpose of that particular, that project needs. You know, for inserts, like reverbs, I would, you know, generally put reverbs in like a send, so that, you know, multiple devices could go to, multiple tracks could go to that reverb in varying amounts. So, you know, I would do that as a send and do, you know, my channel EQ here and, you know, compression. And if you wanted to just change the signal flow, see what it sounds like, it's no problem to do it. You don't have to repatch the patch bay. But, you know, try to approach every project from a different perspective. If it doesn't work, you know, try something else, try something different. You know, it's with software, it's very easy. You're not really totally committing to different aspects. So there's no real, you know, right or wrong reason. It's like, you know, do you start every, you know, would Picasso start every painting with the same red? You know, they would use different colors, different shades for whatever that picture or whatever that painting needed. So that's how I approach it. Question: how should I quantize an egg shaker? You know, I would, let me see if I have kind of maybe an audio file of a shaker here in a loop. All right. All right, let's go with our first one here. And we'll just put on its own track. Okay, so let's say we have this audio file here. Okay, so let's say I want it to be in musical mode. So now we can have this kind of be in time. So let's listen to this. So if we wanted to come over here, you know, if I want to do different quantizing, I would maybe find the threshold, something like this. And then perhaps create slices. And then let's say I'll select all these, and then you could just kind of quantize it. So let's say my quantize value here will be set to, you know, quarter notes, and then just hit Q, and it's going to just only quantize based on quarter notes. Or let's say I want to do, you know, eighth note triplets. Versus, or let's just try eighth notes. So now that we're just on eighth notes, we can, or let's try, you know, quarter notes as we, you know, have the different elements selected here. And just, so as you just hit Q, you could try different amounts, but I would try to maybe, you know, slice it and split it, and then, you know, try to quantize it. So again, let's say eighth note triplets. So you could try different things like that. So that's how I would do it. Ideally, you probably want the egg shaker to be played well, but you know, you don't always have those choices in production. So. All right, see, Shell Yakis mentioned. Got to work with him when I was in college for a project with him and Jimmy Iovine, so that was kind of fun. Good to see his name on a Hangout. I think it's in reference to maybe a Warren Huart interview. Okay. Okay, so it says, how can I cut out silence in audio region and automatically the next audio region glues with the previous? So I think if we just like use a range selection tool here, so let me just, let's say if I have this audio file here, and let's say, you know, let me just see if I could find maybe an example here. So if I wanted to, you know, just get rid of a particular range, I would grab the range from the top and then just go to your range tool. And here you could just do, and let's say I'll set this up. So I want to get rid of this particular range and have that butt up. You know, I could just kind of come right over here and just delete time, and then that audio will undo that. So that part of the range, you could cut the silence out. So let's say maybe I could indicate this here. So let's say I'll take these two files here and I'll just do a bounce selection. So if I wanted to get rid of the silence here and have that, I could just grab my range tool, and you may turn snap on and off by hitting the letter J on your computer keyboard. Select that particular range, and then you could go to edit to range, and you could just do, you know, delete time, or, you know, and now boom, that will just kind of knock the audio over. So I think that's what you want to do. If not, just let me know. Okay. Okay. It says, hi, Greg. Is there a way to use loop mash into a MIDI track because it only works as an instrument track? Thanks. Let's give it a try. So let's add. So I will come over here, let's say to my VST instrument. I'll add an instrument rack. And I'll see loop mash. All right, it says, do you want to create a MIDI track assigned to loop mash? I'll say yes. And then I'll just come over here, load up a preset. And now I will just make sure we have, let's see if I have my range set up. Let me just try my software controller. Let me just do, I'll just see if it's, I'll try it on a new project and see if that makes a difference. So add it as an instrument rack here. Let me just check my VST connections. All right, so now I'm just playing, and I'm just sending different MIDI note messages to send different scenes. And I'll go ahead and just record some of these changes. So that seems to be working fine as kind of an instrument, a MIDI track that's routed to the instrument. And it's just kind of following the changes here. Kind of as expected. So that seems to be working. Yeah, so I'm just using it as a MIDI in a MIDI track, but you may not hear it until you're playing. So check that out and try to make sure you're playing, and then you may hear it kind of react as you expect. Okay, so not Cubase related, but does anyone have some proposal on headphones with flat bass response? Anyone uses the Steinberg STH01? So I think the Steinberg headphones come with the recording pack, and they're very nice. I tend to use, I have like the Yamaha headphones, and I found those to be very flat. And I know that people, I know at one point we did a promotion for an event, and we gave a couple of people free headphones, and I think every one of them commented how they all kind of switched over to the Yamaha headphones. So that may be something to look at as well. But I tend to have a lot of different headphones to choose from. I'm the one that used to always travel and forget my headphones, so I have probably 10 pairs of headphones. But I really like the Yamahas, so if you haven't checked those out, go to a store and check out some of the Yamaha headphones as well. Okay. All right, my timeline jump. Let me see if I could get back to where we were quickly. Thanks for all the great questions. If you have learned a new tip or trick, please feel free to, give a thumbs up and to also subscribe to the channel. Okay, just circling back to where we were. Sorry about this. Okay, so I think we're good. Okay, so it says, can we copy MIDI from one track to another with Control C, Control V? It didn't work for me. So let's say if I want to come here, I'll add, let's just say an instrument track. All right, so I'll just do Command C, come to this particular track, Command V. So that kind of works. Or if I wanted to copy, let's say I'll just come here, I'll delete all of the MIDI notes. So if I'm in this editor, I'll select all, copy, double click in this editor, click here, paste. So that seems to work kind of as expected. So I don't have any problems with copy paste MIDI data. All right. So it's saying Agent K, like the tip on the arrow keys, maybe for the MIDI scrub. All right, so we have a question. Hey, PC users, what processors are you using? Looking to upgrade newer PC from old i950. All right, so I'll let other people do it. I know a lot of guys are having great success with new AMD Ryzens, so I think there's a lot of great choices now. Okay, so let's move on to some other questions. Okay, so it says, hi, I'm asking this because I can't test it right now. Depending on that, I will buy US QWERTY keyboard or in my languages. If a keyboard is not standard QWERTY type, how does key command work? I think they will be set up, that it may be set up kind of per the operating system. I know, like when I go to Germany, like I think the Z and Y are reversed on German keyboards versus American keyboards when you go to type, but the functionality will still be there. So I don't think you'll have any problems. So, but I haven't tried other keyboards, but I know, so it says go buy US QWERTY keyboard or in my language, if keyboard's not in standard QWERTY key types, how does key command works? Maybe someone else could share if they're kind of working with non-US QWERTY keyboards. I'm just kind of, I've only had to work on like when I'm kind of doing email on someone else's computer in Germany, but I don't think there's a problem with that. But I'm not sure, like for non like kanji or whatever is the typed language in Japan, how that works. But it doesn't seem to be a problem for users. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Could you please show how to use Arpeggiator to create bass lines for EDM, dance music to sync it to Cubase 10.5 to follow the beat? Okay, so I'm not an EDM guy. I'm too old and too suburban, but we'll take a look at it. So I'll just add an instrument track. Let's do just a retro log. It's helpful for this. Okay, so I have this, and I'm just going to turn on. I'll just kind of hit one note here, and we'll just get to my MIDI inserts, and let's come over here and just do Arpeggiator. I think either one would work. So we'll choose 16th notes. I'll just hold down a chord. And let me just knock this. So I'm just going to hold just a chord down here. And you could have it automatically go up or go up and down and up. And if you wanted to come here. And you could also try different rhythmic like lengths. And if you wanted to do this, like maybe set it to 18 to do like an octave and a half. So we come here, let's just make it 18. And if you want it to be straight 16th notes. And then even if we want to go down an octave. So you could set up kind of different you know, rhythmic feels, you know, play around. So if I wanted this to respond to a particular, let's just say I'll come here and I wanted to do this with like a quick, I'll do a learn CC and I'll assign this, let's say to CC16. So I'll come here. So now I've assigned MIDI CC16 for my MIDI control. And then if I want to go to auto LFO, let's send it to MIDI C16. So then we could set kind of our value range here. So, you know, you could also do, you know, different LFOs if you wanted to as well. So that's how you could probably approach, you know, using like and whatever kind of chords you play. So you kind of get the idea where you could kind of do that for some EDM type stuff. Excuse me. So hi Greg, greetings from London. Is there a way of keeping track of the upgrades I download from the download assistant, as I keep track of my downloads folder and have downloaded stuff multiple times? You know, when you go to, you know, the download assistant, you know, just kind of, there isn't kind of an automatic way of saying, you know, you downloaded this 2 weeks ago. But you'll see in the Steinberg download assistant, you'll have a target folder. And, you know, by default, it goes into downloads, like your downloads folder on Mac or PC into Steinberg. And then on Windows, it may go to Win64. And then you'd see all the files that are downloaded there. And Mac, I believe it just goes to downloads to Steinberg. And then you could see what folders are there. But there isn't a way to automatically, you know, say you downloaded this already. You may get a prompt as you download it that the file exists there. But just kind of, you know, when you go to the Steinberg download assistant, look into your Steinberg downloads folder that you've specified. By default, it would be into, you know, downloads, you know, Steinberg Win64 in there for Windows and Steinberg downloads for Mac. And then I think you'd be all set. But there's not kind of an automatic way to warn you that, you know, you downloaded this for the 4th time. Okay. Thanks for all the wonderful questions again. Okay, it's just kind of reading through comments. There's always like great interaction with people. I'm always like an hour behind or 2 hours behind as the hangout goes on. Okay, just reading through. Okay, so hi, in Cubase 10.5 in the rack area, when you create an instance for VE Pro, can you save that rack with its outs? I think if you, I don't work with VE Pro, so I'm not that familiar with. I should get a license and because it comes up. But I think if you had it set up with your outputs here, so let's say, And let's say if I close that, and let's say if I save this as a template. Okay, and then I'll come over here. Let's start a new project. And I'll just open up the template I just made. Put it here. That I think if we go to our loop mash, that all the outputs are still maintained. So probably if you save it as a template, but I'm not a VE Pro expert, but you could try saving as a template. I think that's what a lot of people would do. Okay, so it says, hi, everybody. Greg, could we have a long demanded by the community ability to print metronome on an audio track easily in the next version? It's already been there for a while, so we'll show you the trick. So let's say if I'm here in this project, and I'll just revert. So if I have my project here, so let's say, and if you go to your project to signature track, just say render audio click between locators. And now we just have our audio click here, and we'll go ahead and just solo. So now that's just our audio click that's been rendered as a WAV file. So I think that came in 9.5. So again, just go to your project menu and choose signature track. And you could render a MIDI click or render an audio click between locators. So try that, and I think that might do the trick for you. Okay, question. How do I name a cycle marker in 10.5? The E button is not there in the inspector. So let's say I have, I'll just add a new marker track. And let me just add some cycle markers. I'll just erase that one. So I'll come here. Let's just add cycle marker there. Let's add another cycle marker. Do this a couple times. So I'm doing this. I'm just selecting the left and right locators, hitting the letter P with the selected range. Okay, so generally coming right over there, that E, but you're saying that's not showing up on your inspector. So I think it's Command or Control M will open up the marker track. And now when you come here, you could just type in the description. So if you want it to be intro, verse, chorus, incredibly inventive song structure, end. All right. And now when we do that, you could just see, so it should be show up there, but if you have the marker track selected, hit Control or Command M, and that will bring up your markers window. But it should be showing up there. Seeing in our comment from Jazz Dude that he's a VE Pro 7 user. Everything is saved in Cubase. So Thanks for confirming that, Jazz Dude. Okay, it says, hi, Greg, my SSD drive is almost full. Can I just move my projects externally? Could you suggest a portable drive fast enough to load Cubase 10.5 and plugins? So yeah, if you have to the point where your drive is getting full, and it happens eventually, and it always seems with my system, if I have a terabyte drive, I'm going to have 980 gigs of plugin and sample content on it, and if I had an 8 terabyte drive, it'd be 7.98 terabytes full. But if you need to migrate projects, and a lot of times it could be sample libraries, content that comes with Cubase that could take a lot. So if we come over here, let's just jump over to my Finder real quick. One of the utilities that you get is the Steinberg Library Manager. So, Cubase will come with a lot of content, different groove agent kits, so these are different content that comes with Cubase, but you could move these to a different drive. So if you have a lot of your samples on your main drive, you can move the content off of there. If you have just like tons of audio files and projects, the easiest way to migrate those to a different drive is to come over here and just do a backup project. And this would not necessarily move all of the content, but it would create new files of that content on a newly defined location. You could just move the projects over. As far as drives that are fast enough to, like an external drive that's fast enough to load projects, it could really depend. If you're doing like 3,200 tracks of an orchestral score, that may not work. If you're just playing back audio files, you're probably fine. But maybe other people in the Hangout could if other people are running like a portable drive solution. I know there's a lot of portable SSD drives that kind of connect via USB 3. And I know a lot of my friends use those for all their content and libraries without issues. And it seems like Samsung does a really great job with, they're probably the leaders. At least that's kind of my perception. I don't follow it terribly closely, but in terms of SSD, that they probably have some of the better solutions. But check out like a USB 3, or if you have a Thunderbolt capability, that might be even faster throughput. But those are some options to kind of clean up your main drive. Okay, so just seeing, just reading through a couple comments here. And seeing other people just, saying put the SSD in the computer, and that works great unless you have you're running everything off of a laptop. That could be a little more prohibitive. So this might be going back to the question earlier. I'm using a Mac Pro screen, and Cubase 10 does not fit on the screen as the info line is cut off. How do I resize it for the screen? So, you may want to, just out of curiosity, you could minimize, close, or expand. So, my info line, and sometimes depending on the screen resolution, you like when you go to the info line for a particular aspect, like if I wanted to come here and activate all of the different components, I may not have the screen real estate to kind of do that. So just kind of come over here and, there's a lot of times where you could add different components. So, at this point, it's something that you may want to, check out, because you could have kind of default modes, so some different aspects that you could see here. So, some of those may just stretch. So you on for a long time. So if that's kind of the concern, check out different aspects that you may want to see visible on the upper right hand side there. So let me just get rid of a couple of different ones here. So it'll give you kind of an idea, but as you can see, it's pretty much filling up just about my whole screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so we have a question. I sampled my own drum kit into Groove Agent 5. Is there a way to create an icon for my drum kit to display like the Groove Agent add-ons? I don't know of a way to do that. There might be, I could check with, I will go ahead, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I will check with the developers. If it could be, I don't know if it's part of, where that image is actually restored, if it's in the live, I don't know, if you could put your own image. I know you could do it in Halion, but I don't know of a way to do it from Groove Agent to have the graphic image, but it could be just somewhere there's a little graphics file that's needed. But I could reach out to my colleagues in Germany and see if there's a way to have your own, icon for user created kits. But please email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, it says I have a problem with Steinberg Download Assistant in Mac OS 10.15. It has white background and reading white writing's almost impossible. Do you have any idea why it can be that way? I know that there were some issues that some users had ran into with Catalina, and that there was an update maybe about 6 weeks ago to a newer version of the Steinberg Download Assistant. So make sure you had the latest one, because I know that there was something similar, and it was, I believe, Catalina based. But check it out. Make sure you had the latest version, because I know there was an update with that, and that may solve the problem for you. Okay, so all right, just moving on again. Okay, rather new to Cubase, how do you time stretch audio? Example, changing tempo in a song with audio. So really all you need to do is to make sure that all of the audio is, like, as it's recorded into Cubase, it will be tempo stamped for you. We can go to your pool window, and then you'll see something like called musical mode. So I will come here, I'll select all of my audio files here, let's say, and then I'll place them all into musical mode. So now as I want to, and it's once all the files are in musical mode from the pool,
Our musical history.
And let's see, I may have one that's not. Let me just check. Here, I'll just show on the other project as well. We'll jump back to here. So it's not really like a traditional process of time stretch like we see with other programs. But now that we have all these files, we have the tempo stamp and we have them in musical mode. I could just type in whatever tempo I want. Let's say 108, hit enter. 122. 154, and it just stretches it in real time. I want it to be 88. So these will kind of be like tempo parasites. So make sure that you have and as you record the audio in, it's going to be tempo stamped. So try to record roughly with a click track, even if it's slightly off and going to fluctuate a bit. And then make sure you go into your pool window, and then you could select all the files and put it into musical mode. And whatever tempo you enter into transport, it's going to be, it'll just follow. Okay, so it says, hi Greg, I'm getting ready to upgrade to a new Mac and transfer Cubase over to it. What is the best method to do this and transfer over all of my settings, preferences, etc.? So the one thing that people miss a lot of times is just being able to save. If you've worked with a template, save your template, and your template will contain a lot of information like colors and different aspects. But when you come to like all of your preferences and key commands, you want those to translate to a different computer, go to your edit menu and go to your profile manager and save a profile. And then at this point you could, save that profile. You could, just come right over here, do a new profile, give it whatever name you want. And then at that point you could export that to like a flash drive, export it. It's a small file. This will include your key commands, preferences, your user presets for plugins like MIDI plugins or audio plugins, so most of the information will be contained within a profile. So just simply export a profile, and then you can just simply import that onto your new computer. And I think you're 99% there of transferring your settings and your Cubase experience. And if you have other friends or Cubase users, like I know a lot of times, like at trade shows, I'll be doing stuff with, like a presentation with Teddy Riley, and all of his key commands are completely different than, that he's customized, so now next time we do it, he'll just send me his profile and I'll just start Cubase with his profile and everything works how he wants to. I could restart it in my profile and it works how I want to without like messing up anyone else's system. Okay, so let's move on. Question. Hi, Greg. Peter from Sweden. I bought Padshop 2 when I had my Cubase Elements, but then I upgraded to 10.5 Pro, which gave me Padshop 2 incorporated in 10.5. Yeah, so it's Padshop 2 is part of it. Let me see if there's maybe a follow-up question. So Padshop 2, is just a component of the full version of Cubase. It used to be that some of the Padshop functionality, like the ability to drop samples in, was only in Padshop Pro, and that was like an additional $10 add-on. But with 10.5, Padshop 2, included that. So just to make so, but I think you may still have your license separately. But your Cubase Pro 10.5, that license will also carry over. Sorry if you hear the construction vehicle outside. The house I think is pretty close to being done. So I think they're at the very last stage of putting all the sod down. So, and it's just right outside my window. So apologize if that's annoying. Okay. Okay, so seeing a lot of great discussion on different people's SSD drives that they're using. So to see Peter's point probably about Padshop, I wonder if it would be more appropriate to give me a discount for another plugin. I'm not sure if they're going to give you a discount for another plugin, you know, since you could still run that Padshop in your, you know, if you had Cubase Elements. So if you have your Cubase Elements, that Padshop 2 license I think will still work. So I'm not sure if they're going to get a discount on another plugin. But I understand kind of how that could be frustrating. Okay, just okay, going through some more, reading through comments and questions. Okay, we're doing well on time. Okay, so question, is there a way to superimpose a MIDI track over an audio track in the editor? What I know some people do is, you know, if they have, let's say a MIDI track here, so let's say, you know, I know some people that will do like this type of thing where you can see kind of the MIDI track that's aligned in the lower zone editor with, you know, with the audio part on the main project window. But there, you could have two different MIDI. You have multiple MIDI tracks in the same editor, or multiple audio tracks in the same editor, but not MIDI and audio simultaneously. But if you kind of split up your screen, and you could also just come here and say, I wanted to have this editor in a separate window. You know, as a floating window, and then I go to my MIDI part here. So you could probably just have, you know, your MIDI and audio like that, but no way within the same editor because they're different editors. Okay, so we have a question from Ambient Dave. Hi, Greg. How does the MIDI compressor work on velocities? I've seen it being used, but not fully understand it. Thanks. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's come here. Okay, so I'll just take a look. I think we can maybe get a sense from, we just load up a kit that's maybe a bit more dynamic. Okay, so take a look at let me just check my octaves here on my controller. All right, so we have kind of a brush kit here. So let's say if I have my velocities or a very soft velocity, this is a Simon Phillips jazz kit, which is wonderful. Okay, so what I want to do is get to my MIDI inserts, and let's go to our compressor. And I think what this is going to do is basically just allow us to compress like our velocity range. So if I put on 2-to-1, let's do something like an extreme setting, like a 4-to-1. So now for every, so if I go kind of soft to loud, and let's do like an 8-to-1. So this would mean that my velocities, we have 128 velocity values, that my velocity is only going from like 1 to 16 in like an 8-to-1 ratio. If I go 2-to-1, now I'm only getting half of the range, or now it's going 1-to-4, so it's kind of the opposite. So anytime I hit a note, we could have that velocity range. So let's say I do a 1-to-1. Now I'm going to have kind of the full velocity range. But 8-to-1, I can't reach. So basically what it's going to do is kind of just limit the velocity. Let's see if I come in here to a MIDI monitor, if we could see the velocity. Okay. All right, so we'll see value 2 as I hit the notes. Now that we have this on 8-to-1, I don't get nearly the range that I would on 1-to-1. So think of it kind of like, just dividing your velocity values as you're inputting it. So if you have like, if you want the snare drum to be very consistent all the time, think of just, doing that so that your snare drum will constantly give you the same figure. Or if you want it to be very dynamic, you could alter that as well. So those are some of the things you could do with the MIDI compressor plugin for velocities. So just see a comment. I hope they don't add Howling in 6 full version to Cubase 11. That was more money I spent. So I haven't heard of any plans. I don't think it'll do that because Howling is kind of its own platform as well. So, okay, so how do I time stretch audio to produce a tape effect? So there's a couple different ways. If you want to do like a tape stop, there's ways of doing that. So let's say if I'm here, I could go to my master effects, and there's a plugin called Loop Mash FX. It's under Other. And now as I kind of play back, I could just come here and do. Let me just see if I have this. Oh, I have it on the wrong kit. That's why. All right, sorry. Let me just scroll over and put on my stereo out. So there's a couple different tape effects. So if you want to do kind of different tape stop, this you could just kind of, as you're playing along. So you could do stuff like that. Or if you wanted it to kind of mimic the sound of an analog tape machine, that's for more vari speed. type of functions. I could select all the files here on the project window, and I could assign their algorithm. So I'll put their algorithm, all these into tape. And now as I slow down the tempo, just like an analog tape machine. The pitch will change. So go back to original, just have the same pitch. So if you want to do kind of like very speed recording effects, you could do that with using the tape machine algorithm mode, or using loop mash effects if you want to do like just like a tape drop kind of effect as well. Okay, so it says, hi Greg, question. Hi Greg, can you explain what are primary, secondary parameter fine, increase, decrease? I applied it on an audio track and events and it doesn't work. So let's say if I wanted to, let's just maybe take a vocal. Let me just open up in our project here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just kind of double up. I'll duplicate our vocal here. And I'll just turn this into a different audio file. So I'm just going to bounce selection. Okay, so all right, so it just says secondary. Okay, so your primary, secondary parameter, fine, increase, decrease. So this is just going to be tuning. So I will take both of these vocal files here and solo them.
Guess all along I was so naive.
So now as I do this, I'm going to fine tune this to be by
Now
sense.
you're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history.
So now it's going to
laid out
be.
on the floor.
Now I could slightly
I've got
detune.
to choose.
I'll make this one
What's
sharper.
mine and what's yours? 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones.
So I could do transpose here. I believe this is what the question's asking about, and that would do semitones, and this would be just fine tuning. So now we're 19 cents sharp on the bottom
Played
vocal,
our records into the night.
and be the same.
I turn it up, you wouldn't
And if I
mind.
do -2, you could have subtle pitch
Up
shifting,
until now.
make a vocal sound a little thicker. So I think that's what you're referring to, and may not be super apparent on all audio files, but if you do it with something pitched like a vocal, I think you might hear it a little clearer. Okay. Okay, let's just going through different questions here, reading through. So there's always great discussions again. Okay, so I see just a question. Editing audio of an 18-minute video, Cubase Elements 10.5 crashes each time. Have you heard of this happening? I haven't run into that with editing audio. I'm not sure if it's, you know, I'm not sure, it could be depending, usually the video codec is, could make a difference, but I haven't really heard of it crashing. But if you have a video file that that you could send me a link to download at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to kind of check it out and see if I could recreate it, Calvin. Okay. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, just going through a lot of great discussion. Just going through looking for questions, make sure I don't miss anyone's questions. So I think I'm not sure if this is part of the discussion, but it's from Scott Jordan. Have you ever heard of a plugin that takes an audio guitar signal and applies synth sounds? Boss has a new foot switch that does it, but it's hardware based. You know, I think, I don't know any plugins that do that specifically. You just do like kind of real time pitch to MIDI conversion. But I think Boss has something kind of interesting. I think Fishman transducers, I think it's kind of best handled in hardware at this point for different latency concerns. So, all right, so move on. So, and I'm just seeing more comments about the copying and pasting MIDI notes from track to no track. Anyone? So, I know it was probably before I got to that function, but it seems to work as expected here, as we saw. And just seeing kind of a comment on the envelope shaper. It's kind of a compressor, that envelope shaper. It kind of gives you the sound that a lot of people want to use compression for. So. Okay. Okay, so I see from Pablo, guys, does anyone know why Cubase Pro 10 is ahead when recording, even if you go on time? So if you could specify, Pablo, if that's for MIDI or audio, and sometimes that could be just related to, if you have a lot of plugins like into master effects, try out of curiosity to toggle the constrained delay compensation. And see if that makes a difference for you. Okay. All right, good to see Nick on the Hangout. All right. I think my timeline, let's just go on. Okay, just reading through comments, lots of great comparisons. A lot of great discussion again. Okay, so just seeing a comment, are you saying sending multiple channels to reverb effects track uses less CPU? So if you're, there's a lot of people I see that, every single track they run a reverb as an insert. And as they do that, reverbs can be, computer processors are faster today, but a lot of times people I find are using the same insert reverb, for 40 different channels. And at that times you're using 40 times the processing of that reverb as opposed to running it as a send. So when I wanted to come over here, so generally, using one reverb that is shared across multiple channels, like if we look at here, I can see multiple channels going out to my one reverb, that is, significantly more efficient than running independent reverbs as different inserts on each of those tracks. So yes, it's definitely more efficient to run reverb effects as and delays often as sends. Okay. Okay, so you see, how does MIDI compression in the piano roll work? So if you wanted to compress, different velocities, we could do that quite easily in the piano roll. So let's say if I wanted to select all of the notes, and if you wanted to just kind of scale your MIDI velocities, you could just kind of increase or decrease by grabbing in the center upper part. If you wanted to compress kind of to make it more, if you go to the right center, we could have it kind of the differences between the values compressed or expanded there. So that's some ways of kind of getting like a similar type of compression effect for velocity. So you could, expand or compress the differences between the velocities, or you could globally decrease the velocities there. Okay, so just seeing comment, guys, could anyone help me, please? I bought Cubase just a few days ago, and I can't activate my license for the sake of my life. If you could specify which version of Cubase, but generally when you buy Cubase, if you buy it, it's most of the sales aren't done with boxes in the shop anymore. So what you get is a digital access code. You create a My Steinberg account, enter the digital access code. At that point, you'll get within your My Steinberg an email with your e-licenser code. So if you have Cubase LE AI Artist, you can have that e-licenser code once the program is installed. You'll have a utility called the e-licenser. And the e-licenser program will kind of look like this. And once you've downloaded that, you have the download access code. Once that's entered in, you'll come over here and you'll just see enter activation code, and you could just paste that activation code directly in, and then your Cubase will be authorized. If you're running Cubase Artist or Cubase Pro, when you authorize it, you're going to need the USB e-licenser as well. The other versions, LE, AI, and Elements, could be run off a software e-license. Okay, so we have a question. I couldn't able to hear any voices from the media bay. Would you please help me to fix it? So if we jump over here to the media bay, and I wanted to start auditioning different loops and samples, you could just kind of audition. So as we do that, and what you probably need to do is to go to your audio connections if you're in Cubase Pro. and make sure that you have the control room active. So you want to add a monitor and make sure that the control room is active. You'll see the outputs here. And probably what you want to do here is to have a stereo output, but choose it to be not connected. I realize that sounds counterintuitive, but when we preview different aspects, it goes through the media bay. So as we wanted to just audition, now you could audition just that easily and hear it in real time. Okay, so question, how do you get the arrangement track to work with audio files where, for example, the voices overlap? So as you work with the arrangement track, think of, the arrangement track as being, it's going to be for a very specific point in time. So we add an arranger track. And at this point, we could choose, our different, let's say intro, if I do it on the arranger track, that would be helpful. So if I come here, we could just choose kind of different song structure, let's just say it's this, and you could have parts within an arrangement part. So, and we could choose to just have these, create a non-linear arrangement that will jump around between these different sections as we play it. Now, if you have a voice that is coming in right at the very end and is not sustaining through, that is not going to be the best. You may have to do edits on that particular part to make sure that the parts fit. If you wanted to have the best use of this tool, do your edits so that they fit within your defined arranger sections. And then that way you can freely kind of jump anywhere. So you may realize that when you get to the end, maybe, you're hearing the first chord of the next part because the MIDI is slightly ahead of the beat. So just have to be cognizant and be aware that when you're working with your arranger track, for it to be the most effective, that, your different parts are going to be contained within those parts. And then you could freely kind of go from any part to any part without any kind of, musical oddity between that's kind of imposed by the arranger track. Okay. Okay. All right. Let me just, my timeline had jumped. I see all the questions I have ahead of me. Okay. Okay, so just saying comment, great demo to envelope shaper. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really underutilized plugin. So, yeah, seeing our comment, Loop Mash, tons of fun. Yeah, Loop Mash is kind of a plugin you could spend a weekend with and still not feel like you've gotten the most out of it. So it's cool. Okay, so I see other people helping Carlos with his, Millard Brown says, I guess Carlos is going back to the licenses that we were discussing a little earlier. So it says, I see no licenses, and I put the code in, and it says currently there is no e-licenser connected to your computer. So, you could always go to elicenser.net and make sure that is downloaded. It's generally downloaded, is generally installed with Cubase, but if you go to elicenser.net, you could download it separately. So if you don't have the e-licenser, you could do that, but generally it's going to be installed with any of the Cubase versions. And it's going to be just, a separate program. So I see question, is Loop Mash a VST or a VST. I don't see it in my list. So it works as a VST-I, a VST instrument, and then there's a performance section that we showed earlier, and that works as a VST instrument. Depending on which version of Cubase that you're running, you may notice that that it might not be in every version of Cubase, so it might be limited to Pro, but I'm not sure if it's in Cubase Elements, for instance, but you could check just to make sure. So if you don't see it and you have Cubase Pro, you should definitely have it, but it may be a unique feature to Cubase Pro. Okay. Okay, so just see a question. What is this live stream about? So generally, the live streams that we do are just questions from people and users, and we just try to answer them. So there's not like a pre-canned topic. So we try to. So every hangout is different depending on the questions that we get from people. Okay, seeing other people that going back to our comments on copying and pasting MIDI data, that they're not having any problems with it either. So, okay. Yeah, seeing other people not having any problems with copying and pasting. All right. And Jazz Dude brings up a great point. Loop Mash is a hidden gem. You can drag and drop files directly into it. Yep. Okay. And just see a comment that I'm a cool suburban. You know, I appreciate that. So try to have my street cred. All right. Okay, so just reading through different comments here. So lots of great discussion. All right, sorry about the construction vehicle directly outside my window. So usually we're almost done with the construction next door. Usually the grass is the last thing that goes in. So I think hopefully by the next Hangouts, maybe the people will be moved in before the end of the month. Okay. Okay, so we're seeing more discussion of, all right, then velocity compression techniques that we showed a little bit. So sorry, I'm behind the discussion here. Okay, so let's see. People think I'm a fan of Stranger Things. I think I saw a couple episodes on a plane or something. So I see a question. I have a Steinberg UR22 audio interface, and I'm working with an Asus laptop. Everything works fine until I charge my laptop. and the UR22 is still connected, then the UR22 start to shut down every 2 seconds. I would check, when I've heard stuff like this, it's generally related to, it could be different power settings. A lot of laptops will kind of, the big critical criteria for laptops is battery life is, probably the second, biggest criteria for a laptop. So a lot of times, different laptop companies, to make the battery last longer, may throttle the CPU and hard drives so that they're not working as hard and the battery can last longer. And sometimes also the USB ports may have some energy saving modes. So try to make sure that your energy, and you may have to go into your BIOS or your USB port settings, and you could probably Google how to do it, but make sure that your USB port settings aren't on like an eco mode or power energy saving mode, and see if that makes a difference. I kind of suggested that to people who are having similar issues, and once they made that change, then it was like a big epiphany for them that everything in their USB worked better. Okay. Okay. All right. So seeing other users helping out with the e-licenser. Okay. So again, we had a question about incrementing the event volume. So we did that earlier. Okay, just again reading through discussion. So okay, so I see a question: can Halion import .nki files? I believe it can import. I think the .nki is contact format, I believe. So it can import contact libraries, but if the contact library has copy protection on it, we won't import that, kind of out of respect to the authors of the of the content, so we don't try to break any encryption. But on a basic level, it can import NKI files, but a lot of the libraries will be kind of encrypted now, for so the companies can create new libraries. Okay. So question, I have a reverb set up as an external effect. I also have patch names set up. Is there a way to see and change the patches from the hardware insert in my effect track? Thanks. There isn't, and it's really, it could be if, some reverb companies may choose to, can have VST effect editors. I think Lexicon's done it. I think maybe even Yamaha did it with the SPX 2000 as well. And that way you could see all the different editors. But if you wanted to see it, you may have to have a separate MIDI track for that. But you could come right over here if you go to more options and go to your MIDI device manager. Let's say if we install a device, we may have an effect unit in here. Let me just see if I see one. I know I have some on my personal computer. Okay, so I don't see one, but it would basically, let's say, you had a O1W at this point. You could just set it up with, where that effects unit is connected to MIDI wise. Add a MIDI track we'll choose the output, and you could just save this. So let's say it's set up for your O1W, and then if you have all the patch script for your names, you could see all the effect presets that you could scroll through here. But there isn't a way to consolidate it with the external effects editors. But, if the effects company made a VST interface, you could definitely do that. So you could always reach out to the effects company, but you would have kind of a MIDI track to send a MIDI program change messages and select different presets in addition to the external effects integration. Okay. Okay, so just seeing a comment that musical mode seems pretty convincing. Yeah, it works really well, especially being able to correct stuff or speed stuff up here and there, have subtle tempo changes. All right, so I see a comment, tempo parasites, new term I just learned, laughing out loud. So yeah, I don't think parasites would get offended. So it's a term I use sometimes in my presentations. Okay, let's move on. All right, so we have someone checking in from Denmark. Okay, we hope Gareth has a good weekend. Okay. Okay, so I have a question. Still having problems with VST Performer connecting to Studio. Any ideas, please? Using Windows 8.1. Make sure that the Performer. I'm not sure if it's designed to work in Windows 8.1 or not, or if it's just a Windows 10. But make sure that, that if they're on a wireless network, it's always going to be significantly more reliable to have a wired, steady connection. That would be the big thing. And make sure, so that would be, if you're not able to connect or see them, that would probably be the thing. But also check to see what the system requirements are of VST Connect Performer as well, because I think everything is kind of at Windows 10, but I could be mistaken. So it says, we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to select multiple parts of an audio track and quantize it? I tried this. It only takes the first part. So let's give it a shot. Let's do a new project here. Okay, let's just take. Sorry, I'll just fix my 32 bar offset. I wonder why. Okay, so select multiple parts of an audio track and quantize it. So all right, so let's say I had, okay, so it says, if I try this, it only takes the first part. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and make some slices here in my sample editor. Okay, so I'll select multiple parts here. So I could definitely see that moving. So we can quantize it to quarter notes. That moves. So if you undo, you can see where it was and redo. So that seemed to be able to quantize the multiple audio parts and not just the first one. Okay, question. Is there a way to make a macro to automatically rename cycle markers from clip name? I don't think so, but let's see if we, I'll give it a quick stab. Sometimes I don't want to spend 40 hours on it. It's kind of annoying to other people. All right, so let's say if I'm here, so let's see if we could do just a quick. All right, so I'll just add this. Okay, so we'll have it open the markers. All right, I'll try this here. So I'm going to just add a marker track. So if I start here with the description, okay, let me just see if I can add one more command. And if not, I'll play around with it over the weekend if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But let me just see. All right, so I'm going to start with this selected and see if we get this going. So it copied the event and not just a name. I will play around with it some more and see if I can get it figured out for you. But I say it's about 50-50. We might be able to do it. So. Okay, so it says, hey, sorry if this has been asked before, but is there a quicker way to access tap tempo than opening Beat Calculator? There's a couple different ways. So, Beat Calculator definitely works, and you just hit your space bar. I think that's pretty easy to do if you have a MIDI event. Like, let's say if you have a MIDI track here. So just quickly add an instrument track. And I put this into record, and I just hit MIDI notes. So let's say that you could now come over here, and if you don't erase it, but you could select the event and go to MIDI, and under functions you could do merge tempo from tapping and say I was doing quarter notes, and you could do kind of a tempo track based upon that as well, based on a quarter note. So that's a couple ways, but I don't think it's incredibly long just to go to Beat Calculator and hit the space bar. So and you could assign a keyboard shortcut for that as well. Okay. So it says, Greg, I have several audio files in my project that I can't place in musical mode and have question mark in a tempo and pool display. What is wrong with these files? So if you have an audio file that is not, figuring out, like, if you have a file, it could be that it just doesn't have any tempo data. So like when we drop a loop in, here, let me just do a couple things here. I'll just so as we drop a loop So, and we go to the pool, we could just simply, kind of come over here and you could see what the tempos are of the different files. Now, not every file has tempo metadata in it. So what you could do is, often just kind of come here and, you could just say, count how many measures this is. So let's say that's 4 bars. So if you go to your beat calculator, I think we could do it right from the beat calculator and say this is 16 beats. So we're in 4/4 time. So you say it's 16 beats, and that will give you the tempo automatically of that loop. And what you want to do is within the pool. So you go to your media to pool, you can now just kind of come right over here and just enter in the correct tempo value. And then once you know what that tempo value is, put it into musical mode and you should be all set and it could work. But it's probably indicating that there's no metadata for tempo for that particular file. And then you just need to provide it in by entering that into the pool. Okay. All right. All right. Just my timeline jumped, so I'm just catching up to where I was. Bear with me. Okay. Okay, just seeing a comment from Steve McRae. Good to see you on a Hangout. Hi, Greg. Thanks for all these Hangouts. Learning so much. Still a long way to go, but enjoying these using 10.5. That's great. I hope they're helpful. Okay, so question, how do you bounce a track or tracks that have been cutted and edited from the beginning so I can share it with another DAW? So let's say, if you have a number of different edits on tracks that are going on, and, you've done, fade ins, fade outs. Let's say you made it louder. Let's say you've cut, part out, and you wanted to consolidate all these different edits. Really, all you have to do is just select the files, select the events on a project window, and go to audio. And you can just choose bounce selection and replace events. And that makes a new audio file that you can pass on to anyone. And they can't really mess it up. That includes the fades, the silence, and the edits for you. So try just going audio to bounce selection. Okay, question. Okay, so we got that. All right, good to see Coast Mastering. Michael, good to see you on. Hey, Greg, key commands question. Is there a key command to open VST Panner, key command to open key commands? So I don't think the VST Panner, we'll take a quick look. So if we go to key commands here, looks like we get to assign a key command under the edit category to key commands. But I'm not sure if the panner, I know you're doing. Yeah, I don't know a way to open the panner from the mixer here. So let's say if we have this set to like a 5-1 out, let me just create my audio connections here. All right, I'll just search, see if I can find it. So I don't think there's one for the panner. Yeah, so I don't know of one for the panner, but I'll pass that along. I think I passed it on for you previously, but I'll make sure to reiterate that. Sorry about that. So I just see a question in my Cubase 10.5. It takes a lot of time to show preset list for all stock plugins, all third-party plugin presets loads very fast. So I'm not sure if you're accessing the presets from Media Bay, but I'll just kind of pop over here. So let's say if I want to go to delay plugin and just click there, that seems pretty responsive. Let me just try another plugin. Let's get to frequency. Click there. It could be, one of the things that could be causing a delay. Go into your media bay, and if you go to your VST sound here, make sure that you have all of these. You could try to rescan the presets. So when you kind of come over here to different, let's say to the factory content, and then you'll see VST3 presets, try just to, maybe select a Steinberg one here and just right click and choose rescan disk, and make sure that it also, has that. And there's one preference that might trick this up a little bit. So if we go to preferences and under media bay, sometimes it could be that the folders are only scanning when media bay is open. Try to uncheck that if that's checked. So that a couple things to try. Okay, so just see question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to ensure that Cubase 64-bit has access to all my RAM, 32 gigs? In other words, is there a setting somewhere either in Cubase or Win 10 that can restrict how much it uses? Cubase will kind of use however much RAM you want. Sometimes plugins, though, could be a different story. So if you wanted to go to, let's say if we have a Halion Sonic SE, for instance, or samplers will often have like an options page where you could restrict how much of the instrument's RAM is being utilized. So this is only going to take 1.2 gigs, even if you may have more. So, different instruments or streaming from disk may have different disk preload times that may be limited and designed for systems that don't have 32 gigs of RAM. So Cubase will kind of be able to use that, but individual plugins may be restricted internally. Okay, so what is the simplest way to export all tracks in a project as individuals without track bus processing for stems delivery? So let's kind of just load up a quick project, or I'll make some stems here for us. So I will add, let's say, a bus to all my drums. So add a group channel. Let's make it a stereo group. Okay, and I'll just put envelope shaper and all my drums here. Okay, and I'll add a group channel to guitars. I'll just go ahead and call this drums. All right, so let's just take a quick listen to it. So I'll just do some obnoxious EQ here. All right, so now that I have my drum group and I have that, I could just... Okay, so if we wanted to just kind of take this, so currently, we could, when we do an export audio mix down, I could say, let's export our groups. I'll just select multiple. I'll say, let's take our group channels and our audio channels. And at this point, that would render all of our different effects here separately. So I know what some people do when working with a lot of stems is they may actually just they may render the groups as audio here. So, and import that into the project. So let's go ahead. We'll create unique file names. So now we have our drum group and our guitar groups kind of all going on simultaneously here. Now what I know some people do if they wanted to, take like this with all of the effects and EQs on individual tracks is, you could do just a simple render in place for these. So if you do like your audio mix down, we could just have those all be dry. But if we wanted to include different processing options where we wanted all the, inserts and EQs and sends, at this point you could go to, let's just say I'll take my drums and we'll do a render in place. And then under the render settings, you could choose to have channel settings. And at this point, we could just render this. And each of the drum tracks that we had selected can now be rendered with their effects, their EQs, their inserts, kind of all the processing that we've done. You could include the master effects if you wanted to. So we'll just do this here. We'll give it a second to catch up. So that will basically, and I have the group muted here, of course, so that's going to print the audio files. But that will, so doing the render in place is another good option, because when you select the events, you could do, go to your render settings, and here you could have the channel settings, which would be the inserts, EQs, and channel strip. You could include the sends, as well as the sends to channels with the master effects rendered on each of the files. So so that may make sense for making stems very easily. So. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, my timeline jumped here. Let me just... Okay. All right, so Michael, I see your question on the montages. I think that you might be able to make it into a super clip, but I'll play around with it. But I think a super clip might be able to do what you're doing. But I'll play around with it and give you a call over the weekend. Okay. Okay, so I see, Greg, how can we change multiple files in the inspector to toggle between musical mode? So if you wanted to take the tracks, you have musical mode and linear mode. So if we come here and I select all of these tracks, you go to the project logical editor. And then I think it's even one of the presets. I'll set it up. So let's come over here. Let's transform. If property is set to... Let me just see if there's I thought there's a preset for this. Okay, toggle, if you go to toggle time domain for selected tracks. So we'll say transform, we'll say container type is equal to track, and property is set to event is selected, and under track operation, time domain toggle. So right now these are all set to musical mode. These selected tracks will now be in linear mode, and we could just kind of go back and forth between all of these selected tracks, so musical or linear mode. And again, that's just under tracks, toggle time domain on selected tracks. Okay, just going through. So I see a question: is there an alternative key commands profile for those of us with no numpad? I don't think there is one. Just and the key commands, just because you don't have the key commands on the numeric pad doesn't mean that the equivalents are going to be found on a traditional keyboard without the numeric pad. So there isn't one. So that doesn't just, there isn't one, it just takes all those functions and migrates it over. I mean, you could obviously make one if you wanted to. I think it's, for me, my Cubase experience, and it's always much better when I have the numeric keypad, but there isn't one. It's like numeric keypad on and numeric keypad off. So all right, so just seeing Michael's comment. Thanks, Greg. Quick VST panner access is important with high track count and Atmos work. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I know I mentioned it before to the team, but I'll reiterate it again. So always has more weight coming from you, Michael, than does me. Okay. Okay, just going through different comments here. Okay, so you see a question. Okay, so is there a way to convert automatically a group of 2 mono files to a stereo when importing those files into a session? There isn't a way to do that automatically, because I can see where that could be problematic. But if we select the tracks once they are imported, you could go to your project menu, and under convert tracks, we could say mono to multi-channel. So we say our selected tracks, we want to keep our source tracks, or we could mute or get rid of them, and we'll choose a stereo file. Okay, let me just put these in. But yeah, just go to project convert tracks and mono to multi-channel. Let me see if I'll just select it here. Try it one more time. I think this should do it. And then that would make our stereo file. So it won't do it on importing, because if you're doing a large number of projects, but you could, as you do it, you could automatically erase the 2 mono tracks or mute them, and other sources, stuff that you could do with that. So. Okay, so just see question. Hey, Greg, is there a way of multi-freezing in one go in Cubase or Nuendo? Really, what you could do is, freezing is kind of one track at a time, but if you want to do multiple ones, all you'd have to do is really just do like a render in place would do that for you quite easily. So if I wanted to take, multiple tracks, just load up a different project here.
You were the party,
so if I wanted to just take a couple of tracks here, like a couple of events, I could take these 2 tracks here, just go to render in place. I'll just choose my render settings, and at this point, instead of having to render multiple tracks at once, I could just render it. I could, get rid of the MIDI parts. I could have it muted. I could have it disabled. So at this point, I'll just come here. There's my multiple tracks that have just been rendered. So instead of using a multi-freeze, try just doing render in place. I think it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I see a question. What do I do if I can't enable record? So if I come here, let's do a new project. So say if I add an audio track, so make sure that you have, if you can't record, it could be that you don't have an input bus defined. So when there's no bus or no inputs in our audio connections that you could open by hitting F4, make sure that you have an input defined there. And then for the selected track, you see if this says no bus, I can't record enable. As soon as there is a bus, so say I choose stereo in, then I can record enable. So it's probably that you don't have an input bus defined for that particular track. Okay, let's move on. Thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned a new tip or trick, please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Sorry, I keep hitting my microphone with my headphones. Okay, so and also seeing about not getting output, make sure that you have this, it set like the audio that was recorded, it's not going to the main output. Make sure, sometimes I've seen people where, maybe they have a number of audio tracks and then all of these are sent to a group where we could do, so say if I add a group to the selected channels, so all these channels are now sent to this group. And then I see this happen, what you're describing, where you lost the connections. If like this group track was removed, then all of these tracks that were routed to the group are sent to no bus. So you could select those tracks and hold down like Alt or Option plus Shift and make sure that they're reassigned to a bus that you can see. Okay, so it says, hi, Greg, thanks for taking the time. Can you please explain the differences between panners in Cubase Mixer and why we would choose one over the other? So a lot of times you may see this like for a stereo track. So we have kind of a balance panner. So if I wanted this to be to the left or to the right, we could pan that accordingly. By clicking just to the right of that, we could also take this into a combined panner. So this would allow us to take our stereo signal here. Let's see if we make it just a little taller. So as we have our stereo signal here, I could have most of it panned over to the right, and I could make it wider or narrower. So this way I could say I want this over here or that panner there. And if you go up and continue to go up, you could invert the panner as well. So you could just say, okay, I just want to get my left to right and then go right to left and just invert the settings. And when you see the orange panner, that's what that indicates, So I sometimes will get this where people are like, yeah, the panner's backwards. I'm like, oh, it's probably orange. Like, how did you know? So you could see the labels here for the left and right. And as we invert, it'll change right to left. So those are some of the use cases between the two different panners. Okay, so just seeing a comment, your suggestion of rescanning the folder for the stock plugin presets solved the problem. Thanks, struggling with it. Thanks a lot. I'm glad that worked. Thanks for letting us know. Okay. So I see, can it be possible that Greg is caught up with the chat? That's incredible. I'm trying. It's lots of questions. Sometimes it's frightening going back and doing the index how many questions we cover. Okay, so now that I've almost caught up, I think I am caught up actually for the first time ever. We did have some questions that were sent in. So I know we've covered a couple of them, but let me just take a look at some of these since we had people that had mailed them in. Okay. So we had a question kind of going back to about MIDI. It's like how to scale the velocity of only selected MIDI notes while not affecting the other MIDI on this selected track. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's take a look at it. So I think I actually created just a quick file to show some of these. All right, so when we want to, let's say we have, so when we look at this, we could actually see, let's look at our velocity. So if I have just selected velocity notes, but maybe not all of the notes, I could select them here. And if we wanted to just scale, if you go to the bottom, you'll see kind of different anchors. So I could kind of do like almost like a fade in or fade out of the velocities. I could increase or decrease just the selected notes, and I'll spread this out just a little more so it's probably a little easier to see. So just those selected notes, or if I wanted to go to the right edge, I could choose to kind of compress or expand the difference in the velocities. So just kind of select different notes, and then you could adjust just those particular velocities, even if they're overlapping other notes. So question, is it possible to automate the main pitch wheel in the Hallian Sonic? Last time I couldn't find the relative MIDI CC in a drop-down list. So we have this going to Hallian Sonic here. So technically, pitch bend isn't a MIDI continuous controller. It's a MIDI system common message, and this is really geeky MIDI stuff. So that's why you may not see it in a MIDI CC drop-down list. So when I come here, if I'm playing and I want to automate the particular file here, and if I wanted to draw a pitch bend, so when I move the pitch bend wheel on my MIDI controller, we will see that kind of just reflect here in Hallian Sonic. So as I play and I just wanted to record, let's do some horrific musical pitch bending. We can do fretless piano, Rhodes piano. And now when I play that back, that information was recorded directly in. And I could see it present here in pitch bend data where I could also edit it. So MIDI pitch bend isn't a CC, so just, most controllers will have pitch bend. So just use the pitch bend wheel, and then that could control the CC on Hallian Sonic. Okay, so question, are there any really useful and quality controller consoles for Cubase that you could recommend that would really help the general workflow of working? Hopefully it's not expensive. The best controller I've ever worked with is going to be the Yamaha Nuage, and that would not meet the criteria probably of being inexpensive. So that's an expensive one. A lot of people really like, having like an iPad as a touch controller. I really like my CC121 as a controller for editing. It's a single fader, motorized fader, but it's like, very, nice feeling fader and very functional. A lot of people like their Nectar controllers. Some people like their Native Instruments MIDI controllers. So, kind of different schools of thought. You have like the school of Mackie controllers, which is more for mixing, which gives you like 8 faders and some panning and some plug-in control. You have more MIDI controllers that could be better at automating synthesizers and plugins. So, there's kind of different schools of thought. So if you want to do more controlling MIDI stuff and instruments, probably a MIDI controller may be better. If you want to do mixing, like a Mackie control or a CC121 could be a really good choice as well. Okay, so let me just scroll up here. All right, so let me just go to a different document here. Okay, so we had a question. It says, I get this error, and it was a message when trying to open a project using the latest version. Is there a way to recover it? And they mentioned that they're using Cubase 10.3. So, I think the latest version is Cubase 10.2, but it was just kind of error message saying, the project was created with Cubase version 10.512. This program version cannot load it. So if you want to make sure, what actual file, if you wanted to send me a download link for the file, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Okay, so question. Hello, my name is Nejk. Sorry, maybe that might have copied wrong. And I have a question about loudness meter True Peak in Cubase Pro 10.5. I am new and I will be happy if you could explain some things about loudness and True Peak meter. Is it normal for True Peak meter to go above 0 in red even if I have limiters on stereo out set to minus 0.2 and other meters showing no clipping and peaks above 0? I did reference with professionally mastered tracks, and they also went above 0 in Cubase True Peak meters, so I'm a little lost. What exactly is this True Peak meter, and should it always be under 0? Thanks if you could answer that. Have a great day. Nice channel. Great for learning. Bye. It could really depends. Sometimes taking the audio and doing a quick analysis of it, if you go to the audio statistics, is really helpful. But depending on your meters and your converters, a lot of times in digital, when we think of digital as being 0 dB, it's actually kind of minus 18. So you may have some clips. So just kind of, try to use the loudness units, I think, is probably a better metering option. So I would look at that, and you use different reference materials as well. But if it's and most importantly, use your ears to make sure it's okay. Okay, so we had a question. My name is Marion. I want to know how to transfer the remote control editor assignments of an effect which is assigned to effects track to the track cycle controls panels of that effect track. So if I come over here, we could have, if we go to, different effects units here, you could, like for instruments, you could, I think if we come over here, we just extend this over to the right here. And then you could go to the remote control editor. And this is really for different types of control surfaces. So if you have a Nuage or a Yukon based controller, you could use this to configure what exact parameters in this plugin. But that's not related to quick controls. But if you wanted to access, your quick controls, one is make sure that you right click and that you have quick controls accessed. So if I wanted to, if I have Revelation on this, we can now, activate your quick controls. And then when you go to inserts on this particular track here, you could see all of the different parameters for that particular plugin. So just kind of, look at, so this would be kind of what's on this particular track. So here you could have that, and you could then store this as a preset. So, I would do that. So that way you could have your MIDI fader box control kind of different parameters of particular plugins that you're using. So that way you could, use the effects quick controls and just have a bunch of, save that as a preset. And these are my first 8. And you could just say, okay, now I want to go to my volume and panning. I want to go here. Let's go to my EQ. I want to go to my sends. I want to go to my reverbs. And once you have that set up, especially if you work with templates, you could access all those parameters quickly using the quick controls. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. We're doing okay. We've got a couple more minutes. Thanks for all the great questions. I hope everyone's learned something helpful. All right, so let's go back to our live feed. Okay. Okay, so let's just jump back. Okay, so I think we covered the stems for rendering. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I see just a question to sampler. Where do you find velocity for keyboard? So let's just drop something in sampler track. Okay, so now as soon as So, with the sampler track itself, it's really intended to be a single sample. So it's not going to be a multi-layered sample. It will respond to different velocities, like a soft velocity. But if you needed it to be more of a multi-layered sample at this point, you see these 3 icons. You could just say transfer to Groove Agent SE. And within Groove Agent SE, you could have, 32 samples per pad. And as soon as you come over here, you could separate those by velocity. All right, so let's move on just a little bit. Okay, so see question from Coast Mastering, Michael. So connection to 3D mouse integration. So yeah, currently I know like at trade shows, we often use 3D mice for that without any problem for doing kind of the immersive panning. So yeah, so a lot of people are doing that kind of straight out of the box. Okay, so you see how to make the cursor in MIDI editor window follow project view. So let's jump back to project really quick. So let's say if we're here, I'll just revert this quickly. So if I'm in the editor for this particular event here, so let's say as we play. So if I don't have this set to sync, these can be different time views. So those won't be in sync if I click on this icon. It'll do that. I could also choose to have the bottom editor be stationary cursor. So if I wanted that to be out of sync. So now, let's say I don't have those synced. And we have this set to stationary cursor. But if you wanted to follow the cursor window, you could have it sync just like that. And let's say if I take it to page scroll, and then when it's an independent window, that will be independent for different sizes. But with the lower zone, you could just have it synchronized just by clicking there. Okay. So see, question, what's the best way to report bugs to Steinberg? So, there's a whole kind of suggestion format. I think there's dedicated areas on the forums for doing that. So, but you could also send stuff to me and I'm happy to pass it on as well. Okay. So see, question, when you've added volume automation to a track, but then later you want to rebalance that track just using the main fader, obviously you can't. What's the best way to avoid this issue? So, if you have, let's say, automation going on here. So I'll just go to, let's just go to the mix console. So let's say, as I'm playing here, we can just automate this. Okay, so if you wanted to just rebalance, that, one of the things that might help you with that is to just right click and add a VCA fader to the selected track. So let's just see if I come here. So try add a VCA fader to the selected track. And so if you have your automation here, I could just bring down that and it'll still maintain the automation and kind of bring it up. So that way, if you have your existing automation on that track, I could bring it all up a little louder or all down a little softer using a VCA. So where can I post update ideas for Steinberg? I think on the main forum that there's a feature request section. So if you go to steinberg.net/forums and just go to the feature requests. Okay, so question, how to remove notes in MIDI editor. There's same note and length on top of each other. When you select all, it selects both notes on top of each other, and then you'll be deleting both. So try going to MIDI. And then I think under functions, there's a delete doubles. So try clicking on delete doubles. Also, if you go into, generally when you have notes that are like that, they're generally on the same, there are, like sometimes MIDI controllers can be set to output like, 2 MIDI channels simultaneously. So if you go to the MIDI and go to the list editor, you'll often see like where you could say, okay, I have this note and this note is doubled up. And then you could, if you come here to the filters, and then you could just say, you want to filter event channels. And then that way you could see probably the notes are doubled are in different MIDI channels. Choose to filter event channels, select all from one channel, and just hit delete. And that will get rid of your doubles as well. Okay, so with that, I'm just about out of time. I have like 2 minutes before I lose all the closed captioning that YouTube automatically generates. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. If you want to do follow-ups, you can email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. And if you put your email address as a response, that would be super helpful. So you could do that. I want to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy. We'll be doing another Hangout on Tuesday. I'll try to get the Hangout index done tonight so you could refer to specific sections. But I hope that everyone has learned something. It's always a thrill being able to communicate with so many people from around the world. I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions, and we'll see it next Tuesday. The Hangout for next Friday, that may be a holiday here in the United States. I have to check. So we may do the Hangout on Thursday, maybe Tuesday and Thursday of next week. But I'll check my corporate calendar to see if that's a day off for 4th of July in the United States. But everyone, please have a wonderful weekend. And thank you so much. And we'll see you on Tuesday. But goodbye.